We're going to go ahead and we're going to look at how to create a vertical menu flyout. We already created a horizontal menu drop down. The vertical menu flyout is very similar in many ways, but we definitely will have to be using some additional and different code to make it work properly. So our start file looks like this in the browser, and it is pretty basic. Let me just show you what I have so far. In our HTML XHTML portion, I'm using my div ID of Nav Container, and it basically is very similar to the same one that we used for the horizontal drop-down menu. You'll notice that I have several nested lists. So here for my locations, I made sure that the closing li actually wraps around this ul tag, and then I just repeated that again over here under photo gallery. I've closed the li tag for photo gallery after my ul, so I'm going to have two items that will pop out to the sides. I also just inserted some main content. I made a div ID called main content just so we can see how the menu is going to float on top of that. So that's what that is right there. The CSS that's already in here is pretty basic. We have our universal selector that sets everything to 0. I've specified the font family on the body tag. And then here's what I have for the main content. I basically just specified a font size, a color, padding, margin left, and a width. And the margin left is 12 ems. I went ahead and used that value because I specified that my nav container have a width of 10 ems plus a just 10 ems, I guess, is all I put on here. And so I wanted to have some room between the content and the navigation bar. I have some padding that's applied to my main content's paragraph tags, and that's pretty much it for the main content. The nav container, the only other style that we have in here is on the nav container, and it just sets the width to 10 ems. I have a border on the top and on the left, and we're using that kind of turquoise border. I've set the font size of these navigation items, the background color. I'm floating this to the left, and I'm using a margin top of 1em just to push it away from the top of the browser. So that's what we're going to go ahead and start using. I basically went ahead and made the width, specified the width using ems so that we would avoid any box model problems in IE, and the block elements inside will naturally fill the container's width by default, even if the borders are used on internal elements. Mwidths, of course, is going to enable us to resize the content in case the user decides to make the text bigger or smaller. The menu won't break. It'll go ahead and resize. We'll go ahead and we'll begin by creating some styles for our nav containers UL. So the first thing that I want to do is remove the bullets and the indents. My indents actually have already been removed because of my universal selector, so I guess all I really need to do is go ahead and remove the bullets. So we're going to go ahead and make a style for that, and of course I'll be using nav container. I'm just going to copy this right here, and I'll open close my curly braces right there, and I'm going to be making a style on the nav containers UL. And we'll go ahead and set the list style type to none. So now I've effectively removed the bullets that might appear right there. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to style my links, my A tags right there. So let's go about doing that. I'm going to go ahead and make a style for nav container A. And we'll go ahead and we'll get rid of the underlines. So this is going to be our text decoration. And the text decoration is going to be set to none. We're going to go ahead and we're going to set the color of the links, and we'll be using that 069 color that we've used before. We're going to go ahead and set the padding so we have a little bit of spacing, and I'm going to go ahead and set the top and bottom to 0. Left and right will be 6 pixels. and I'm going to go ahead and use my display property of block, and this is just to ensure that the list items in the drop-down highlight and wrapped lines will indent correctly in case I'm going to be using those. So if we save our file right now and refresh, you can see that I've just kind of styled some of my A tags right there. Let's go ahead and let's continue by making a style for our hover. So nav container A : hover, and all we're going to do here is we're going to change the text color so that when the user hovers over, the text will change color. And this is pretty much the same thing as we did in the horizontal menu. So now you can see that those things all are going to hover over correctly. All right, the next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to position the pop-outs. So now we want to move to the second level nested list items, and we want to move them where they should be to their pop-out position. We're going to use absolute positioning to be able to do this. So let me scroll down a little bit right here, and we'll go ahead and we'll make a new style for nav container, and I'm going to go ahead and make this style on UL, so the nested UL. And what we'll go ahead and do is use a position property of absolute. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to set the top value to 0, and we'll set the left value to 0, and I know I need a semicolon up there. Whoops. There we go. Now if I save and we go ahead and refresh, you're going to see that this doesn't look ideal. Obviously we have taken those list items and taken them out of the flow of the document, but there's obviously several things that are wrong. They're not positioned where we want them to be. We want them to be to the right of their pull downs, and they aren't the correct width anymore. And they also are no longer displaying with their background colors. So we definitely have some fixing that we need to do. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we can overcome these problems together. So let's go ahead and start doing that. These lists, basically, when they were in the flow of the menu, they were in the default static position, and they appeared in the flow. They appeared right underneath the other list items. They basically took their inheritable properties from the parent elements. Now that we've removed them from the flow using absolute positioning, they essentially have no parent element. So instead, they have a containing block. So the pop-outs at the minute are positioned at top 0 and left 0 of their initial containing block, which is the viewport or the HTML root element. So what we really need to know is that if an element has a position of absolute, the containing block is established by the nearest ancestor with a position of absolute, relative, or fixed. And if there is no such ancestor, then the containing block is the initial containing block. So for us, what this means is that for our menus, we establish a new containing block for these pop-ups by adding a position of relative to the nested UL's nearest ancestor, which in this case is going to be an LI element. That is, and if we look down in the code, you can actually visually see this happening. Here's my nested UL. Their nearest ancestor is indeed a LI tag right there. So we're going to go ahead and use relative with no offset coordinates specified, and that won't affect the actual position of the element, the LI element, and it'll only affect the actual UL elements. So let's go ahead and let's fix this up. We're going to have to correct some of the CSS that we just specified in our nested UL, so we'll do that momentarily too. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and specify a style for nav container LI, and what I'm going to do right here is go ahead and just set the position value to relative, And then what I need to do, if we save right now and we refresh this, you can see that it does move these things down, but now I want to move them over here to the right. I don't want them to sit right on top. So I'm going to do that by making some changes to my nav container UL style. I'll still leave the position as absolute. Top will remain at 0. Left, however, is going to become 100%. So basically, it's going to set them to 100% left to avoid having to do any sum with widths again. I don't have to figure out any widths. And I'm going to also specify that the width itself is going to be set to 100%. And this is basically based on, of course, the containing element, which is that li tag. So if we save and refresh now, you should notice that these are where we want them to be. Now we need to go ahead and add in our background colors, and we'll do that shortly. So let's go ahead and let's put some background color. I need to, and some borders too. Let's go ahead and put this on the nav container li. So the first thing I'm going to do is set a background color so we can see this a little bit easier. And the background color is going to match the background color of the other list items that I'm using. So if we save and refresh in the browser, now you can see that these are much easier to see. We do have some overlap here, but I'm not really worried about that. That's going to fix itself once we specify that we only want the location flyout to appear when we're hovered over locations and the photo gallery to appear when we're over the photo gallery section. I do want to go ahead and I want to add some borders in here. I have a border on the left and on the top of my main nav container, but I'd like the borders to be present around the nav items and in between the nav items. So let's go ahead and let's make that fix right now as well. We'll go ahead and we'll specify a border bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and specify the border bottom to be solid, to be 1 pixel, and to have the appropriate color value assigned to it. So that's what I'm doing right here. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to also specify the border right. Let's just copy this line of code since we know this is what we want, and we'll paste this in and change the bottom here to right. And if we go ahead and save this and refresh in the browser, you can see that now I have some of my borders, most of them actually are there. I do have a little bit of problem over here along this left edge. All of the borders are not appearing correctly, and we'll go ahead and we'll specify that by defining a style on our nested UL. So let's go ahead and let's type in here. Oh, I still thought I had my nav container in my cache, but I don't, so let me go grab that real quick. Okay, nav container UL. I'll open and close my curly brace right here, and I'm going to go ahead and specify that the border on the top be, it's going to basically match these settings right here, so I'll just copy paste that in. And if we save now and refresh, this will give us the border on the top. So now this is looking much better. We still have this border on the left to deal with, and I'll address that shortly. We can basically make the border on the left appear by styling the li, because these guys are li's, so that's where we need to put the border. If I assign it to the ul, I'm going to get an over set on my border here, and it'll look double thick, which we don't want. So let's go ahead and let's just set that setting now. I'm going to just stick that right here because it seems like it'll make more sense to put it underneath my nav container li. So we'll specify li. Here's my closing curly brace, and then I'm going to go ahead and set the border left. I'll just copy one of these, and we'll change this setting right here to left. So basically what this does is it's going to create the border on the left of the flyout item. So let's save and refresh, and now these all look the way I want. Now one small problem that I have now that I've added the borders, you can see how if you look under locations, the secondary flyout menu is actually pushed down 1 pixel. We experienced the same problem when we were doing our horizontal menus, as we recall. So we can fix this by using a -1 pixel on our Nav Container UL. Instead of setting the top to 0 right here, if I just set this to -1 pixel, if I refresh, you're going to see that now that lines up perfectly. So that's basically gone ahead and fixed that for us. So now our pop-ups are in the right position, and the only thing that's really happening is some of them are overlapping vertically, but as I mentioned, that's okay. They're where they should be. We're only going to be seeing one pop-out at a time. So as soon as we take their display and let it be toggled by the hover, then that will go ahead and take care of itself. So now what I want to do is I want to begin by hiding and revealing using hover. So let's hide the pop-out menus altogether. To hide the pop-out menus, all I need to do is tell my display to be none, and I'm going to do this on the UL. So my nested list items, I want them to inherently have a display set of none, and this basically will hide them, so if we refresh, those go away. And that's perfect. Now what we want to do is we want to get them to reappear, and we'll do that by declaring when a LI item is hovered, we want its child UL to appear. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that by specifying a style for Nav Container. And let's go ahead and let's specify it on the UL LI :hover UL. So that basically is saying the Nav Container's UL LI, when the first tier list item is hovered over, then we want to talk to that nested UL right there. And we'll open and close our curly brace, and we'll change the display here to block. And by doing this, if we save our page and we refresh our page, you can see that now this is working properly. Now, of course, we are going to have some issues in IE, so if you're testing this in IE, it's not going to be working correctly, but it basically achieves what we want in the non-IE browsers. So now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll make a fix for the IE browsers. That's going to be the thing that we need to do next. So basically, we're going to use the same HTC file, the CSS hover HTC file that we used for our horizontal menu, but instead of just attaching it to the body, and that's what I did for the horizontal menu that we built before, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this in a conditional comment, because obviously the non-IE browsers are going to be displaying this menu fine. They are okay with displaying a hover on something other than an A tag. So what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and we'll make our fixes for IE. If you do have the ability to test this in IE, you're going to see that you have several problems. The hovering does not activate the pop-outs. There's going to be a white space, a strange white space that appears between the list items. And basically the anchor hover background change is only going to work if the link itself is hovered over. We want it to happen if the whole block is hovered over. So we'll go ahead and we'll fix these things right now, and we'll do that by using a conditional statement. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and add in our CSS hover file. So let's go ahead and let's do that now. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and make the hover actually turn white in the background real quick. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that prior to doing this. I'm going to make one more new style here for Nav Container, and we'll go ahead and we will specify the LI hover, and we're going to go ahead and just set the background color. Oops. the background color to white. And basically if I save now and refresh, you're going to see that when you hover over any of the buttons, the background turns white. So this makes it look it's a little easier to see what's going on. That of course would not be working properly in the IE browsers either because it's using the hover. But as soon as we add in our CSS hover.htc file, all of that is going to work just fine. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to specify that I want this to call this file if the browser encounters IE. So I'll come here before my closing head tag and after my closing style tag, and I'm going to go ahead and set up my conditional comment. And we've talked about the conditional comments before, so I start with the opening tag, exclamation, dash dash, a bracket, if IE, close the bracket, close the tag. Next line is going to be style type, and we're going to make this equal to text / CSS, and that's of course is going to go into quotes. I'm also going to go ahead and specify that the media be set to screen. This isn't completely necessary, but we'll add it in there. We haven't really done that yet on one of these, so we might as well try different things. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set the styles that I want. So my style is going to be body, open the curly brace, and behavior. And I'm going to go ahead and put colon URL, and then in parentheses I put the path to the file, and my file is just in the same root directory as this HTML file, so I don't have to specify a special path. I'm just going to put the name of it and dot the extension, close parentheses, semicolon, and curly brace. So I'm basically writing the same sort of style. Instead of having the formatting on several different lines, I've just formatted it on one line. And when I tend to make these conditional comments, I just find it easier to have that display on one line like this. So that's why I set it up like that. Then I'm going to go ahead and have to specify that I want to end the style tag. So we'll close the style tag. Dreamweaver is trying to help me there and make a closing head tag, which I don't need, so I need to get rid of that. And then I'll close my conditional statement. So exclamation, open the bracket, and if, close the bracket, and dash dash, and the terminating tag. So here we go. If we save this, of course, here in Firefox, we're not going to see anything, but if we were on an IE browser, we would now have the ability to hover over. The next thing that you would see is that there would be kind of a weird spacing issue right here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to fix that next. It will get rid of the white space like in between the list items. So we'll come back to our code right here, and I'll just put this inside of my conditional comment as well so that it'll fix those things. I'm going to come right up here, and underneath the body tag that we already specified, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my nav container. So hash nav container space ul space li, and the style that I'm going to write to fix this is going to be a float of left, and I also need to set the width to 100%. Okay, so that's the first thing, and the next thing that I need is I need to specify the nav container, and I need to do a ul li a, and I need to set the height to 1%. And this is just a little fix so that the IE browser is going to eliminate that white space that we don't want. So here is the correct conditional statement that we want to include in here, and this will basically get rid of that white space problem in all versions of IE, and also make the anchor into a proper block, so activating the color is going to change the background color as well. And that's pretty much it for our vertical flyout menu system. So you can see that in a lot of the situations, the code that we used was similar to what we did on the horizontal menu, but we did have to have its own kind of special little bits of code to make it work properly. Now you know how to make both vertical and horizontal flyout menus, and I think that you'll find them useful when you're creating websites.